Hey ho, here's another game on Kickstarter that you can look at. This one is quite new on Kickstarter. I was browsing through the games page, see what was on, and Rail Theory, which is this game, caught my eye. It is made in Unity, which is quite fitting because I was having a discussion last night about Unity, about how, it has a bad rap and everything. But here's a game that shows that you can make a visually unique game in Unity, as many games have. When you cut away the dozens and dozens of games that give Unity a bad rap, you might find something like this, where, some of that stuff might be pre-built, I don't know, but it doesn't matter because thematically it all looks good. And it's got a unique idea, this whole randomized enemy thing. You got these enemies that are made up of different components. I've played a little bit of it. We'll talk about that after after we've looked at this sales pitch. And it's not too evident in the demo. There's some random bits, but it so far doesn't have much of a mechanical impact on what's going on. But some of these big enemies are pretty intimidating. And I like the look of them. They remind me a lot of the, I forget their exact names, but they're in Resident Evil 4, which is a game that I find myself comparing this to quite a bit mechanically. But the nigh invulnerable things that have weak points inside them, that look a bit like Heaven Smiles from Killer 7. You've got these things that are all sort of black and oily with these skeletal grins on their faces. And not all of the monsters look good. These sort of faceless, muscular ones aren't particularly interesting to me. But the sort of crystalline, skeletal, sort of these, common garden enemies, I find quite visually distinct and interesting. To say nothing of the main character. The main character with their sort of eyeless, featureless mask that nonetheless is sort of strapped together. The character looks like all of their clothing's just sort of been cobbled together. So it's a really nice visual style to it, and that's the Kickstarter video for that. So that's good, isn't it? So like I say, there is a demo for this. You can get it on their Kickstarter page. I downloaded it. I gave it a play. This is my footage here. Early impressions are pretty promising. It is a rough game. The aiming's a little twitchy. The melee combat could do with a real bit of an overhaul to it. But as far as a foundation goes, I think Rail Theory has it pretty solid. I mentioned Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is hard not to think about when I look at this game. Obviously, the red dot sight on the main character Flynn's gun is a bit of a tell as to where the inspiration came from, as is some of the contextual attacks. You can shoot them in the head and whatnot, and they'll react to where they were shot, and you can do, like with Resident Evil 4, although I've not been able to trigger it very much. I think I've triggered it once, and even then I pressed the button and it didn't quite work. So this is sort of early demo stuff. This is one of those games where you can tell how rough it is playing it, but you can tell that's because it's an early demo. Not like some of these early access games that come out and you can tell they just didn't bother. Here you can tell they've bothered and they've just got some creases to iron out now. But you can shoot them and stagger them and then press a button to do a melee attack to knock them down, very similar to latter-day Resident Evil games. The demo alone doesn't give much in the way of this randomized enemy idea, which I do find fascinating. This idea that it's similar to like No Man's Sky, you've got these mix and match critter parts that you can mash together. I like the idea of using that to make randomly generated enemies. Random generation is such a big deal in gaming these days. A lot of people confuse, I think, procedural generation for game design and think one can take the place of the other. I'm much more of a fan of the Lego approach to random procedural content, where the stuff is already pre-built, but it's used and fused in unique ways. So I'm interested to see where that goes, and I wouldn't mind seeing enemies where, they have, like, their body parts can operate differently as different weapons and stuff. Right now, you got some big enemies with pustules on them that act as sort of weak points. You've got regular enemies with bits of them protected with crystal that you can shoot off. That's all very interesting, but I really want to see, like, you know, oh shit, that one has tentacles and spider legs, so it's going to be really quick and have reach, you know, that kind of stuff, where you can look at it and think, okay, tactically this is different. Obviously, being a demo, I'm not expecting them to tip their entire hand there, but I do hope it's more than just aesthetic. That when you look at enemies, you start to recognize certain body parts, and statistically or, you know, combat-wise, what that means to you as a player. But as far as a third-person shooter goes, with some melee stuff and some real challenge, there's some challenge to this demo. For an early going, this is good. I mean, technically it's stable. You know, it was holding at 30 frames per second. On the highest graphics setting, without any real dip or anything, so stability is there. They've got a solid foundation. I think they just need to add to the melee combat a lot more, sort of make that more involved than just sort of button mashing and hoping your character connects. And I feel like the protagonist could feel a bit more fluid when they're walking and everything. It's very easy to miss doorways and get into that kind of truck-like steering, so that's something to watch out for. And hopefully this comes off as constructive criticism, both of those words spelt with a K, because that's what we do on this show, because it's cool also spelt with a K. Yeah, I figured what I'm going to do for the Kickstarter videos is, you know, not necessarily pick games that I think are going to straight out the box be fantastic, but ones that have potential, that could be something quite good. And, you know, might just need some critical nudges here and there. A look at what's currently wrong with them, but what they're doing right as well, and what they should capitalise on. Capitalise with a K.
Let's have a poke around the page.
Okay, so we're going to have a poke around the page now. Have a little poke around the page. This is by Triconic Studios. That's regular Triconic, not Ubisoft Triconic. Rail theory and action RPG with innovative difficulty and randomly generated enemies. Yeah, I can definitely talk about the dynamic difficulty. Some of these bastards come at you thick and fast. What I like about this game, actually, is that it's not afraid to have enemies jump you from behind. A lot of scary games I've played, horror games I've played, the enemies still always just come at your frontal. And they might use some, that sounded cheeky, you know, you might hear some noises and stuff, but you never, after a while of playing, it's like, okay, I'm now used to the idea that no enemy is ever going to sneak up on me from behind. Here, yeah, they sneak up on you from behind. And it can be quite alarming to have that happen. But anyway, what we got here, 150,000. Some people are going to look at that and think that's too much. That's one of the problems with Kickstarter games, is people look at what I would call a fairly realistic goal and think it's too much money. One of the issues that happen on Kickstarter is developers undersell how much they need, because that's got a better chance of making the money and getting some money as opposed to no money. You know, the all or nothing thing. But I think that's, for what they're trying to do, 150 ain't too bad. They got 20 backers right now, 29 days to go, so everything to play for. In Rail Theory, you play as Finn Whiterer, the last human contact of a research facility on the planet Argonus. Alright, that makes sense. You must salvage working components from destroyed Argonian ships in an attempt to repair your own. However, an outbreak of a crystalline-based life form known as the Rithamolos will not make this a simple task. Features randomly generated enemies that adapt to playstyle and skill. Again, not seen a huge amount of that in the demo itself, but clearly that's something they're going to build on. Dynamic difficulty system, which affects enemy component generation. I understand what all those words mean on their own. Those are the kinds of words that need to be applied to a context. I don't know, how that all works, but cool. Open world cause and effect environments, which change depending on the order areas are completed. Unique health system consisting of armor, trauma, and stamina. In the demo, you've got your armor, your trauma, which is your health. but your health meter and your stamina meter are kind of the same. I wouldn't call it so much a unique health system. It reminds me a little bit of Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, but a bit more blunt. But anyway, multi-purpose weaponry used for range and melee, which you will have seen doubtless in the gameplay video that I showed. Here we are on the bit of the page that's got the information I wanted, the context. You see this GIF here just showing you what a stock enemy can look like with its different variations. Randomly generated enemies, they change the offensive and defensive characteristics of enemies. That's exactly what I was wanting. Again, wasn't totally evidenced in the video, but hopefully that will be more obvious as it goes on. That can affect different behaviours and things. Dynamic difficulty system, that's based on in-game player statistics. Affects the likelihood certain components will be created. So basically how well you do determines what you get. In terms of enemies, the enemy on the right has more plate defense and a horn that can be ripped off. I saw that in the demo. I did see an enemy rip its own horn off to use as a weapon. In the demo, these components can always spawn on an enemy, but are more likely to spawn as a result of landing shots or taking low amounts of damage. The game will reward you for playing on the upper bound of your calculated skill. Alright then. Cause and effect environments. The order in which areas are completed changes the properties of surrounding areas, so you can go to different areas and do them in your own order, but it'll change the properties of enemies and boss fights. How interesting. There's that stamina system I was talking to you about. High trauma can have other effects, increased aim shake, reduced movement speed, so keep your health up, otherwise you're going to get fucked. Enemy weapon properties will also change in real time. The first hit from a blunt weapon could cause it to shatter, turning it into a sharp weapon. How interesting. Other effects such as caustic damage can also modify weapon damage. You see the different properties here. The demo features a unique weapon for both melee and ranged attack called the Foil Dredge. Ammunition types will include fire, ice, caustic, and more. Some good art here. I'm not normally a fan of the black oily creature look. I found them quite uninspired in the last Prey. But here, I think with the splash of colour and just the way they've used enemy shaping, they've made some really interesting looking characters. Stretch goal is to have an original soundtrack. Cool, yeah. It's nice to have original music, different environments, all this. So a lot of ambitious stuff, but I do feel like these guys might have the moxie to pull it off, so to speak. It's the team here, Kickstarter, all of that stuff. So this is all stuff we can look at. We'll look at the rewards and everything. If you are interested in backing it, I never personally tell people to do that or not. As a case in point of putting my money where my mouth is, I'll always back at least something on a video I feature, but I never tell people to follow suit. But anyway, pledge $15 or more, Spinal, that's a digital copy through Steam. 20 or more, Early Bird, digital copy, console version, of, if available, digital wallpaper. Pledge 25, you get pretty much all of that. Yeah, pretty much all of that. Jade for 30, Early Bird, console version, stretch goals, digital art book, original soundtrack if they get that goal, 35, 50, 70, it goes on and on and on. I don't know if there's any really interesting ones. For 1,000, you name and stylized portrait in game, you design an enemy, so that's fun, isn't it? I like to look at what I call the reasonable ones more than those big 1,000, 2,000 ones that have a very small chance of getting anywhere. Between 50 and 200, I normally... that's where you get interesting rewards that aren't exorbitant. So at 50, we've got a trench coat costume that you can get, a digital copy of Rail Theory, and all of that. 75, you get pretty much all the same with a poster. Flynn and Foil Dredge Grimdark skin set with a printed art book at 100, and all your previous rewards. So yeah, it's on and on like that, and that's that really. That's the game.